The earth itself seems to hold its breath when you stand beneath the towering monoliths of Göbekli Tepe, the pre-agricultural sanctuary that rose from the Anatolian steppe some 12,000 years ago. How could a people, who had only just learned to gather wild grains, conceive of such massive stone circles, each pillar carved with snarling beasts and enigmatic symbols, and then abandon the site before the final stone was set? At first glance, the site appears to be a simple gathering place, a seasonal altar where hunters offered thanks to unseen forces. Yet the precision of the work tells a different story. The T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 40 tons, were quarried from distant limestone outcrops, hauled across rugged terrain, and raised with a knowledge of engineering that rivals later Bronze Age constructions. Their surfaces are polished to a sheen, and the reliefs of lions, scorpions, and hybrid creatures are executed with a skill that suggests a dedicated guild of stone carvers, not a nomadic band. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple layers of construction, each newer circle built atop the older, indicating that the site was not a one-off event, but a long-term, evolving project. Radiocarbon dates show bursts of activity punctuated by long silences, as if the builders returned after generations, only to leave again. No evidence of a settlement, no domestic refuse, no burial grounds, just the silent stones themselves. Why did they stop? Some scholars argue that a sudden climatic shift at the end of the Younger Dryas, when temperatures rose dramatically, could have forced the community to abandon the high-altitude plateau in favor of more fertile valleys. Others point to a cultural transformation. Perhaps the very act of building the complex was a ritual that reached its culmination, and once the intended spiritual balance was achieved, the site was intentionally sealed, a final offering to the gods. A more unsettling hypothesis comes from the analysis of the animal motifs. The prevalence of predators and hybrid creatures could reflect a mythic war between forces of chaos and order, a conflict that may have culminated in a catastrophic event, perhaps an earthquake or a massive fire, so devastating that the builders could not, or would not, rebuild. The stone circles show signs of fire damage in several pillars, yet the ash layers are thin, hinting at a brief, intense blaze rather than a prolonged settlement fire. Even today, when the sun sets behind the basalt hills, the shadows cast by the pillars seem to move of their own accord, and the wind whistles through the carved eyes of the lion, as if the ancient spirits are still watching, waiting for a return that never came. The mystery remains. A civilization capable of dreaming in stone vanished before its masterpiece was finished, leaving behind only silent sentinels that whisper of a purpose lost to time. The answer may never be found, but the stones continue to ask, what price did they pay for reaching beyond the limits of their world? What if the most sophisticated computer ever built by humanity was hidden inside a corroded bronze lump for 2,000 years, waiting for modern eyes to finally glimpse its gears? The story begins on a storm-tossed Greek island in 1901, when a group of sponge divers hauled up a centuries-old shipwreck from the depths of the Aegean. Among the shattered amphorae and rusted iron anchors lay a small, unassuming block of corroded bronze, its surface etched with a tangled web of tiny, gear-like teeth. At first, it was dismissed as a simple time-keeping device, a relic of antiquity. Yet as the fragments were painstakingly cleaned and examined under the glow of early 20th century microscopes, a terrifying revelation emerged. The object was an analog computer, an astronomical calculator capable of predicting eclipses, planetary positions, and even the irregular cycle of the ancient Olympiad. The Antikythera mechanism, as scholars later named it after the island where it was found, contains at least 30 interlocking bronze wheels, some as fine as a human hair, arranged in a cascade of nested gears. Their ratios correspond not to the crude calendars of most ancient societies, but to the sophisticated lunisolar cycles known to Hipparchus and later refined by Ptolemy. One set of gears models the 235-month Metonic cycle, another tracks the 19-year Saros eclipse series, while a third predicts the 8-year cycle of the ancient Greek games. The craftsmanship is astonishing, cutting tolerances within a few microns, using tools that would not reappear in Europe until the medieval period. How could a civilization that had no concept of gears larger than a water wheel produce such a device? Some researchers suggest that the mechanism was the work of an elite group of Hellenistic engineers attached to the Alexandrian school, a hub of scientific inquiry that vanished after the Roman conquest. Others point to the possibility that the knowledge was transmitted from the lost libraries of Babylon or even from an as yet undiscovered pre-classical golden age of Greek technology. Yet the truth remains shrouded, as much as the original casing that still bears the scars of centuries beneath saltwater. When X-ray tomography and 3D modeling finally peeled back the layers of corrosion in the early 2000s, the hidden inscriptions emerged. A series of Greek letters that appear to be a user manual, warning of the device's complexity and urging only the learned to operate it. The very existence of such a manual hints at a tradition of technical documentation that we have no other record of. It is a chilling reminder that our ancestors may have been far more technologically adept than the linear narrative of progress suggests. And so the Antikythera mechanism sits in a glass case at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, its gears frozen in time, yet whispering a question that still haunts scholars. Did the ancient world once possess a scientific knowledge so advanced that it could have reshaped the course of history, only to be lost in the tides of war and forgetfulness? The answer remains locked inside the bronze teeth, turning silently beneath the weight of mystery. The water of Krasnojarsk's blood-red lake has been whispering a crimson warning for more than a century, and every winter it rises again, a scarlet tide that defies ordinary explanation. How does a remote Siberian basin, nestled between jagged cliffs and endless taiga, become a perpetual river of rust-colored liquid? The question haunts scientists, locals, and the few daring explorers who have dared to set foot on its icy shore. When the lake first entered the record in 1913, a group of geologists noted that its surface was a deep, almost metallic red, as if the water itself had been dyed with blood. The hue does not fade with the seasons. Instead, it intensifies as the temperature drops, turning the whole basin into a shimmering scarlet mirror. Some early accounts speak of a metallic taste, a metallic smell that clings to the air like a warning fog. The locals tell stories of ancient spirits that weep into the lake, staining it forever. Modern investigations have offered a handful of clues, none of which can fully account for the phenomenon. One prevailing theory points to the lake's unique geology. The basin sits atop a massive deposit of iron-rich pyrite, and as the water freezes, it can release minute particles of iron oxide that remain suspended, scattering light in a way that creates the vivid crimson. Laboratory analyses of water samples indeed reveal elevated levels of dissolved iron and manganese, but the concentration is far too low to produce such an intense color without some additional factor. Another hypothesis suggests a biological component. Certain extremophile algae, known to thrive in cold, mineral-laden waters, can produce reddish pigments as a protective response to ultraviolet radiation. In the lake's extreme environment, a bloom of these microorganisms could tint the surface a deep red. Yet, when scientists have filtered the water and examined it under microscopes, they have found only sparse traces of such life, far insufficient to paint the whole basin. A more unsettling speculation involves the lake's hidden geothermal activity. Beneath the frozen crust, some researchers believe there may be slow, sulfur-laden vents that release iron sulfide compounds into the water. When these compounds oxidize upon contact with the cold air, they could create a rust-like sheen that spreads across the surface like a living stain. The problem is that seismic surveys have yet to detect any significant heat source, leaving the theory on shaky ground. What remains consistent across every account is the sense of unease that the lake evokes. Photographs taken at dawn show a surface that ripples with a slow, almost deliberate motion, as if the water itself were breathing. The surrounding cliffs echo with the wind's mournful howl, and on clear nights the moonlight turns the crimson waves into a luminous blood river, casting an eerie glow on the snow-covered forest. The mystery deepens when you consider the lake's history. Local indigenous peoples speak of a red spirit that was unleashed when an ancient burial mound was disturbed centuries ago. Some historians link this legend to a forgotten settlement that once thrived on the lake's shores, a community that vanished without a trace, leaving only their stone tools and the scarlet water as a reminder. So far, no single explanation can reconcile the chemical data, the biological surveys, and the cultural lore into a coherent picture. The blood-red lake of Krasnojarsk remains a living paradox, a place where geology, chemistry, and myth converge into a single, terrifying tableau. As the winter winds howl and the crimson waves continue their endless dance, we are left with a simple, chilling thought. Perhaps some riddles are meant to stay forever bathed in red. What if the most mysterious book ever written is not a secret code, not a map to treasure, but a living echo of a civilization that vanished without a trace? The vellum pages of the Voynich manuscript have sat in the dim corners of libraries for 400 years, their ink swirling in patterns that defy every known alphabet, every known language. Scholars have traced its provenance to the early 17th century Jesuit collector, Emperor Rudolf Roman II, yet the manuscript's origin predates his collection by decades, perhaps even centuries, hidden in the folds of a world we can no longer see. When Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-American antiquarian, purchased the codex in 1912, he opened a Pandora's box of curiosity. The 240 vellum pages are divided into sections that seem to describe herbal medicine, astrological diagrams, and a bizarre, balneological chapter of naked women bathing in tubs of unknown liquids. The drawings of plants are unlike any known species. Some botanists swear they resemble extinct flora. Others argue they are pure fantasy. The astronomical charts show constellations that do not match the night sky of any known epoch, hinting at a lost cosmology. For more than a century, cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists have attacked the script with every tool at their disposal. Frequency analysis shows patterns that mimic natural language, repeating words, consistent syntax, yet no bilingual key has ever emerged. Some propose that the manuscript is a sophisticated hoax, a medieval prank crafted to fool the learned elite of Rudolph's court. Others argue that it is the record of a forgotten tongue, perhaps the language of an isolated alpine tribe or a monastic order that guarded its knowledge from the outside world. Radiocarbon dating of the vellum places its creation between 1404 and 1438, a period when Europe was emerging from the Black Death, when mysticism and alchemy flourished. Could the manuscript be an alchemical grimoire, its symbols deliberately obscured to protect dangerous secrets? Or is it a compendium of herbal lore from a culture that never left written trace beyond these pages? Recent AI-driven analyses have identified statistical regularities that suggest the text is not random, yet the meaning remains locked behind a cipher that refuses to yield. The mystery deepens when you consider the strange, almost hypnotic quality of the illustrations. The women in the bathing scene appear to be chanting, their postures echoing rites that some anthropologists link to pre-Christian fertility cults. The astrological diagrams contain a sun surrounded by 12 moons, each bearing a different animal, a configuration that does not correspond to any known zodiac. And the plant drawings, with their serrated leaves and impossible seed pods, seem to be drawn from a collective memory of a world that has long since disappeared. So the question remains, hanging like a candle in a dark chapel: is the Voynich manuscript an elaborate medieval hoax, a clever enough deception to fool even the most diligent scholars of its day? Or does it hold the voice of a lost language, a silent testimony of a people erased from history, waiting for the moment when a key, perhaps a forgotten dialect or a breakthrough in pattern recognition, will finally unlock its secrets? Until that moment arrives, the pages continue to whisper, their ink stubbornly unread, inviting us to stare into the abyss of the unknown and wonder what other mysteries lie hidden in the shadows of our past. What if the sands of the Arabian desert once hid a kingdom so rich, so powerful, that ancient poets called it the Atlantis of the sands, and then, without a trace, it simply vanished beneath the dunes? The story of Ubar, the legendary city of the inevitable, begins in the brittle verses of the Quran, where the people of Ad are described as a mighty tribe whose caravans ruled the spice routes. For centuries, their name was spoken only in whispers, a myth that flickered like a candle in the night of history. Travelers in the 15th and 16th centuries spoke of a great oasis deep in the Rub al-Khali, a place where dates grew like emeralds and the scent of frankincense lingered in the wind. Marco Polo, in his accounts, claimed to have heard rumors of a city where the walls were built of stone that shone like polished copper, and where the wealth of the region poured into its vaults like the tide. Yet when explorers finally set foot on the desert's surface, they found only endless dunes and the occasional broken ruin. It wasn't until the 1990s that satellite imagery revealed a faint geometric pattern buried beneath the sand, a massive rectangular complex of walls, streets, and a central tower. The site, located near the modern village of Shisar, matched the description of Ubar found in medieval Arab chronicles. Excavations uncovered massive storage jars, camel bones stained with oil, and a series of massive bronze cauldrons that could hold thousands of liters of water, evidence of a once thriving hub that supplied caravans crossing the harsh interior. But the biggest mystery remains: why did the city disappear? One theory suggests that Ubar's wealth came from controlling the lucrative frankincense trade. When the trade routes shifted toward the Red Sea, the city's economy collapsed, and a catastrophic sandstorm, perhaps triggered by a sudden shift in the underlying geology, buried it whole. Another, more haunting hypothesis points to a curse spoken by the poets of Ad. The city was built on a sacred oasis, and when its inhabitants grew arrogant, the desert itself reclaimed the land as punishment. Even today, when the wind lifts the fine grains and reveals a glimpse of stone, the air seems to hum with a warning. The ruins of Ubar stand as a silent testament to a civilization that once turned the desert into a kingdom of gold, only to be swallowed by the very sands it had mastered. Whether the loss was the result of environmental upheaval, economic ruin, or something older and more mystic, the answer remains buried beneath layers of time, leaving us to wonder what other forgotten cities lie waiting, hidden by the relentless breath of the desert. What if the hills of Bosnia could rise like stone sentinels, perfectly aligned, their angles too precise for random erosion, yet their origin is shrouded in a mystery that has haunted scholars for decades? The silhouette that dominates the landscape near the town of Visoko looks like a man-made pyramid, its sides cutting the sky at near-perfect right angles, its apex pointing toward the heavens like a finger beckoning the unknown. Locals have called it the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, and the story began in 2005 when a Bosnian amateur archaeologist, Semir Osmanagic, pointed his camera at a cluster of hills and proclaimed they were the remnants of an ancient civilization far older than the known history of the Balkans. The first clue that sent the scientific community into a cautious frenzy was the apparent regularity of the formation. Satellite images reveal that the hills of Visočica, Pelješevica, and Hill 2 form a geometric pattern reminiscent of the Giza pyramids, with a central apex surrounded by smaller satellite structures. Some researchers note the presence of stone blocks on the slopes that appear to be cut rather than naturally fractured, and a series of underground tunnels that echo with a faint, metallic echo when tapped. The tunnels, discovered by local spelunkers, stretch for hundreds of meters, sometimes widening into chambers that contain strange, polished stone slabs that some claim are aligned with celestial events. One theory, advanced by Osmanagic and his supporters, suggests that a sophisticated Bronze Age culture built these monuments as astronomical observatories, using them to mark solstices and equinoxes. They point to the orientation of the main hill, which, according to a 2012 survey, aligns closely with the sunrise on the summer solstice. Others argue that the same alignment could be a product of natural tectonic forces, the result of ancient landslides that happened to carve the hills into near-perfect angles. The controversy deepens when we examine the material evidence. Geologists who have examined the site report a mixture of limestone and dolomite, both susceptible to weathering. Yet they also note a layer of compacted earth that seems to have been deliberately compacted, perhaps to create a stable foundation. In several places, the stone faces show a faint, regular pattern of tool marks, but the marks are too shallow to be definitively linked to any known prehistoric toolset. Some scientists propose that the patterns could be the result of freeze-thaw cycles, while others whisper about the possibility of an unknown, now lost technology. Adding a chilling layer to the tale are the local legends. Folklore speaks of the hidden city of the angels, a place where a luminous civilization once thrived before being swallowed by the earth. In the 1990s, before the formal pyramid claims, villagers reported hearing low, resonant hums emanating from the hills at night, a sound that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath them. Modern visitors sometimes describe a sudden drop in temperature and an inexplicable feeling of being watched when they stand at the summit. The scientific community remains divided. While some archaeologists dismiss the site as a classic case of pareidolia, our brains seeing order where none exists, others call for more thorough, interdisciplinary excavation, fearing that we may be on the brink of rewriting a chapter of human history. Yet, each new drill core, each echo in the tunnel, each faint stone mark only deepens the enigma. So the question lingers like the mist that rolls over the Bosnian hills at dawn. Are these formations the work of ancient hands, a forgotten civilization that dared to raise stone to the sky, or are they nature's own masterpiece, a random masterpiece that merely masquerades as a monument. Until the Earth finally yields its final secret, the Bosnian Pyramid stands as a dark, silent riddle, daring us to look up, to dig down, and to wonder what we might never truly understand. The wind howls across the barren salt flats of Death Valley, and the night sky burns with a cold, indifferent glare. In the middle of this unforgiving desert lies a field of smooth, perfectly rounded stones, scattered like ancient marbles abandoned by some forgotten hand. Yet these are no ordinary boulders. For decades, they have seemed to defy the very laws of physics, inching across the slick, cracked crust of the playa without any visible force, leaving behind a trail of fresh, wet footprints in the dry earth. How could stone, weighty and inert, move of its own accord? Witnesses first reported the phenomenon in the early 1900s, describing massive rocks that appeared overnight in positions far from where they had been left. The locals called them the sailing stones, a name that conjures images of ghostly vessels navigating an ocean of sand. Scientific expeditions have tried to capture the secret. In 2014, a team of researchers set up time-lapse cameras, infrared sensors, and pressure plates across the racetrack playa. Their footage finally revealed the hidden choreography. A thin film of water, frozen overnight, thaws at sunrise, turning the surface into a slick, low-friction sheet. When a gust of wind, sometimes as gentle as a breath, catches a stone that is barely buoyant on the thin film, the rock slides, sometimes traveling meters in a single push. The stones can also hop when a sudden burst of wind lifts them briefly, creating the impression of a slow, purposeful crawl. Even with this explanation, the mystery deepens. The water required for the slick is a rare occurrence in a place that receives less than 2 inches of rain a year. How does enough moisture accumulate to create a film thick enough for movement? Some scientists suggest that the desert's unique mineral composition draws moisture from the night air, while others point to occasional underground springs that briefly surface after winter storms. The phenomenon only manifests under a narrow set of conditions: specific temperature swings, just right wind speeds, and a perfectly flat, hardened crust. Missed by the eye and captured only by patient lenses, the sailing stones continue to glide, their silent journey a reminder that even in the most barren places, nature hides mechanisms that remain stubbornly elusive. And as the sun sets and the stones settle once more, one cannot help but wonder. What other unseen forces are at work beneath the desert's scorching veneer, waiting for the perfect moment to set the world in motion? What if the monsters of legend were not just imagination, but the fossilized remnants of a creature that once stalked the deserts of Mongolia, its very name striking terror into the hearts of anyone who heard it? Deep within the Gobai's wind-blown dunes, a peculiar bone cluster was unearthed in 1995 by a modest team of paleontologists from the Mongolian Academy of Sciences. At first glance, the shattered fragments resembled the skeleton of a massive reptile, but the curvature of the skull, the elongated, hollow snout, and the uncanny arrangement of the vertebrae told a different story. Local herders, who had long whispered about the basilisk of the steppe, claimed that a monstrous beast could turn a man to stone with a single glance. When the scientists lifted the fossil onto a tarpaulin, the air seemed to thicken, and an inexplicable shiver ran through the camp. Radiometric dating placed the remains at roughly 70 million years old, deep within the late Cretaceous. Yet the creature did not fit neatly into any known clade. Its jaw bore a series of needle-like teeth, more reminiscent of a pterosaur than of any known dinosaur, while the rib cage suggested a creature capable of both crawling and gliding. Some researchers have proposed that it belonged to a lost lineage of Azhdarchid pterosaurs that evolved a semi-terrestrial habit, but the evidence is fragmentary, and the specimen's odd morphology has sparked more questions than answers. Adding to the enigma, a set of perfectly preserved, translucent scales was discovered adjacent to the skull. Under ultraviolet light, they revealed a pattern of concentric circles, eerily similar to the ancient Mongolian eye-of-the-sky motifs found on Bronze Age pottery. Could this be a coincidence, or a cultural memory of a real animal that inspired myth? One theory suggests that early nomadic tribes, encountering the fossilized remains of a massive, gliding predator, wove its terrifying features into folklore, giving rise to the basilisk legend that persists to this day. Others argue that the basilisk is simply a misidentified dinosaur, perhaps a theropod with an unusually elongated snout, and that the mythic attributes are a later embellishment. Yet, the strange magnetic anomalies recorded around the dig site, Fluctuations that spiked when the fossil was moved have not been fully explained. Some local shamans claim the bone is cursed, that anyone who disturbs it will suffer misfortune. The scientific team reported inexplicable equipment failures and a sudden, dense fog that rolled over the dig at night, obscuring the stars for hours. The fossil now rests in the Natural History Museum of Ulaanbaatar, sealed behind glass. Visitors who stand before it swear they feel a subtle pressure, as if something unseen watches from the ancient stone. Whether the creature was a real, terrifying predator that inspired centuries of fear, or a paleontological curiosity that was mythologized long after its extinction. The cursed basilisk fossil remains a bridge between hard stone and the shadows of legend, a reminder that the line between myth and reality is sometimes as thin as a fossilized scale. The night over Brown Mountain has always been a thin veil between the ordinary and the uncanny, and the stories that cling to its ragged ridges beg a simple question: why do the lights there whisper? For centuries, travelers crossing the foothills of North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest have spoken of ghostly glows, blue, green, orange, rising from the earth like lanterns set adrift on an invisible tide. They flicker, pulse, and sometimes linger, forming shapes that resemble faces, ships, even entire towns before dissolving into the darkness. Local lore tells of Cherokee hunters who claimed the lights were the souls of their ancestors, beckoning them home. Early settlers in the 1800s recorded the phenomenon in diaries, noting that the illumination seemed to follow the rhythm of the wind, expanding on stormy evenings and fading when the sky was clear. In 1913, a U.S. Army meteorological team set up a temporary outpost on the mountain, hoping to capture data. Their instruments recorded no significant electrical disturbances, yet the lights persisted, darting just beyond the range of their lenses. Scientists have proposed several explanations. One theory suggests that piezoelectric quartz veins within the mountain, strained by tectonic pressure, release bursts of charged particles that ionize the humid night air. Another points to the combustion of marsh gases, methane rising from ancient peat beds, ignited by a rare combination of temperature inversion and static electricity. Yet each model falls short. The lights often appear in patterns that defy simple chemistry, moving in deliberate arcs that seem almost purposeful. Witnesses describe a low, resonant hum that accompanies the brightest flashes, a sound that feels more felt than heard, reverberating through the chest like a distant drum. Some locals swear they can hear faint voices, echoes of a language long dead, carried on the same currents that paint the sky. No recorder has ever captured this acoustic mystery, and no camera has managed to hold the colors beyond a fleeting smear. So the question lingers, as opaque as the mountain fog itself. Are the Brown Mountain lights a natural spectacle born of geology and weather? Or are they something else, perhaps a veil between worlds, a reminder that the Earth can still speak in languages we have forgotten? The answer remains as elusive as the lights themselves, leaving anyone who has stood beneath their glow with a lingering shiver and a whisper of doubt that refuses to fade. What if the very objects that once whispered the power of a forgotten king could simply disappear, as if the earth itself reclaimed its secret? Beneath the mist-shrouded fields of Suffolk, near the tranquil River Deben, the ground gave up one of the most spectacular burial sites ever uncovered. Sutton Hoo. In 1939, a team of archaeologists, led by the determined Edith Pretty and the meticulous Basil Brown, sliced open a massive ship-shaped mound, revealing a glittering trove. A gold-encrusted helmet of the kind seen only in epic poems, a shield rim edged with copper, a bronze purse overflowing with coins, and a procession of iron swords, jeweled beads, and intricately wrought bronze fittings. Scholars immediately declared the find the grave of an early Anglo-Saxon monarch, perhaps the legendary Riedwald of East Anglia, and the world rejoiced at the tangible link to a civilization thought lost to the Dark Ages. Yet, within a decade, the narrative took a baffling turn. When the British Museum organized a post-war exhibition, several of the most iconic pieces, the helmet, the shoulder clasps, and even a portion of the ornate lyre were reported missing from the inventory. Official records list them as on loan or in storage, but no trace was ever found. Some historians suggest wartime evacuation measures led to miscataloguing. Others argue that the chaotic relocation of artifacts during the Blitz created gaps no archivist could fill. A more unsettling hypothesis, floated by a handful of researchers, points to deliberate theft. The priceless objects, coveted by private collectors, may have been smuggled out under the cover of darkness, their provenance erased by forged paperwork. The mystery deepens when one examines the surviving items. The remaining helmet fragments still bear the same gilded motifs, but the missing pieces would have completed a design that aligns perfectly with continental craftsmanship, hinting at political alliances that could rewrite early medieval history. If those pieces were indeed stolen, who benefited, and why has no credible claim ever resurfaced? The museum's ledgers show a series of anonymous donations in the 1950 that match the estimated value of the missing pieces, yet no provenance could be attached. Even more eerie is the pattern that repeats elsewhere. Priceless artifacts vanish after their initial revelation, only to be whispered about in collector circles decades later. Sutton Hoo stands as a stark reminder that some treasures, once unearthed, refuse to stay in the light. The empty slots in the exhibition hall still echo with the clink of lost metal, and the question lingers: are the missing objects truly gone, or are they hidden, waiting for the day when another hand reaches into the earth and pulls history back into the shadows? What could drive a town to watch the sky open up and release thousands of silver-scaled bodies, falling like rain, while the streets fill with the stench of death and the sound of terrified children screaming? In the small coastal village of Yoro, deep in the heart of Honduras, this macabre spectacle has taken place for generations, and each July the sky seems to remember an ancient covenant that no living soul can fully explain. Eyewitnesses describe a sudden, almost cinematic shift in the clouds. Dark, roiling masses roll in from the horizon, a low rumble reverberates through the humid air, and then, without warning, tiny, glistening fish cascade down, landing on rooftops in the market, on the heads of unsuspecting pedestrians. Some reports speak of a single rain of fish that lasts only a few minutes. Others recall an endless deluge that stretches for hours, the water turning a sickly, oily brown as the creatures pile up in the streets. The phenomenon is not a one-off event. Since at least the early 20th century, newspapers from Tegucigalpa have recorded the lluvia de pieces, and older villagers swear they have witnessed it in the days of their grandparents. Scientists have offered a handful of theories, each more fragile than the last. One hypothesis suggests that strong updrafts over the Gulf of Fonseca lift small fish, perhaps sardines or anchovies, into the atmosphere, where they are carried inland by a sudden wind shift. Another proposes that a rare meteorological event, a microburst combined with a temperature inversion, creates a temporary vortex that draws marine life from the sea up a short distance before dropping them over land. Yet both explanations struggle to account for the regularity of the occurrences, the precise timing each July, and the fact that the fish often arrive in astonishing quantities, sometimes enough to cover entire streets. Local folklore paints a different picture. Elders speak of a pact made centuries ago between the village's ancestors and a river spirit known as El Guaza. According to oral tradition, the community offered fish to the deity in gratitude for bountiful harvests, and in return the spirit promised protection. When the villagers broke the agreement, through greed or neglect, the spirit began to punish them with a relentless downpour of its own offering, a reminder that the balance had been shattered. Some families still perform a ritual before the expected rain, placing bowls of water and incense at the edge of the river, hoping to appease the unseen force. No camera has ever captured the exact moment the fish leave the water, and no scientific expedition has been able to replicate the conditions in a laboratory. The mystery deepens when considering the composition of the fallen fish. Many are found with their internal organs intact, suggesting they died moments before the fall, not after a long journey through the air. Others show signs of having been caught in a sudden, violent turbulence, their bodies bruised in patterns that defy simple wind-driven explanations. So the question remains, is this an extraordinary natural miracle, a rare convergence of atmospheric physics that our modern models cannot yet predict, or is it the echo of a forgotten ritual, a cultural memory that manifests itself through the very elements? As the rain of fish continues to drench Yoro year after year, the answers stay as slippery as the creatures themselves, leaving the night air heavy with both the scent of the sea and the lingering taste of the unknown. What if a handful of perfectly round stones, each the size of a car or the palm of a hand, had been silently waiting in the jungle for centuries, their purpose erased from memory, their creators lost to time? Deep in the mist-shrouded valleys of Costa Rica's Diquís Delta, dozens of these enigmatic monoliths, known simply as the stone spheres, lie scattered like an ancient, unspoken code. They are not merely rough rocks. Every sphere is meticulously carved, their surfaces smooth to the touch, their diameters ranging from a few centimeters to a staggering 12 feet, weighing several tons. Some are perfectly spherical, while others bear subtle facets or hollow cores, as if someone deliberately altered their form for a reason we have yet to understand. The first documented encounter with the spheres occurred in the early 1930s, when a group of rubber workers stumbled upon a field of them, half buried beneath layers of leaf litter. Archaeologists later traced the spheres to three main sites: the Diquis, the Osa Peninsula, and the Pacific coast near Golfito. Radiocarbon dating of organic material found in the surrounding soil suggests they were created between 600 CE and 1500 CE, aligning them with the pre-Columbian cultures that once flourished in the region, most notably the enigmatic Diquis culture, a society that vanished shortly after the Spanish arrived. Why did this people labor to carve massive, flawless spheres from volcanic basalt? One theory posits that they served as status symbols, each sphere representing a chief or a lineage, placed strategically to mark territorial boundaries. Supporters point to the varying sizes: larger spheres near what appear to be ceremonial centers, smaller ones along ancient trade routes. Another hypothesis suggests an astronomical function. Some researchers have mapped the positions of the spheres against the solstices, noting that certain alignments correspond to sunrise and sunset points on key dates, hinting at a calendrical or ritual calendar. Yet the evidence remains circumstantial. No inscriptions or accompanying artifacts definitively confirm such a use. A more unsettling speculation emerged after a 1990 survey revealed that several spheres contain hollow chambers, each sealed with stone plugs. Inside, investigators found tiny pockets of air and, in a few cases, remnants of organic material that could be ancient pollen or even human remains, though the samples have never been conclusively identified. Could these cavities have been used for ceremonial burials, or perhaps as storage for precious items? The mystery deepens when you consider that the spheres are sometimes found in perfect geometric patterns, clusters forming circles, lines, or even spirals, suggesting a sophisticated knowledge of spatial planning. What adds to the intrigue is the sheer logistical challenge of moving these monoliths. Some weigh over 50 tons, yet they are found hundreds of meters from the nearest volcanic outcrop where the basalt was quarried. No evidence of ramps, rollers, or primitive cranes has been uncovered, prompting some scholars to propose that the builders employed a system of earthen ramps now eroded beyond recognition, or that they harnessed natural waterways during the rainy season to float the spheres into place. The stone spheres remain a silent testimony to a lost civilization's ingenuity and its secret world of meaning. Each sphere, polished by centuries of rain and wind, reflects the jungle's dim light like a frozen whisper, urging us to ask, what language did these stones speak, and why has it been silenced for so long? Until a breakthrough, perhaps a newly discovered glyph, a fresh excavation, or an unexpected chemical analysis, will the answer stay hidden, lingering like a dark pulse beneath the canopy, waiting for someone to listen? What if every stone, every etched line, every whispered legend we have unearthed across continents is not a random relic of a forgotten past, but a fragment of a single, shattered manuscript? A lost body of knowledge that once bound humanity together. Imagine a tapestry woven from the basalt walls of Göbekli Tepe, the bronze discs of the Phaistos Palace, the strange copper coils of the Antikythera mechanism, the indecipherable symbols of the Voynich manuscript, the eerie alignments of the Nazca lines, and the silent, perfectly cut stone spheres of Costa Rica. Each of these enigmas has baffled scholars for decades, yet they share a haunting commonality. They were created with a purpose that still eludes us, and they all appear to echo a deeper, perhaps universal, understanding of the world. Some researchers suggest that these artifacts could be the remnants of an ancient, globally connected civilization, a network of seafarers, astronomers, and engineers who once possessed a sophisticated grasp of geometry, astronomy, and perhaps even the subtle forces that bind matter itself. One theory posits that the precise angles of the Stonehenge lintels, the magnetic anomalies recorded at the Nazca geoglyphs, and the rhythmic pulses found within the Bronze Age, Baghdad Battery, are not isolated curiosities, but coordinated data points in a grand, planetary map. If that map existed, its purpose may have been to encode a holistic view of Earth's energies, a guide to harnessing them, or a warning etched in stone before the knowledge was scattered by cataclysm or time. The possibility that these disparate pieces form a cohesive whole raises a chilling question. Did humanity once possess a unified insight into the very fabric of reality, an understanding of the sky, the earth, and the invisible threads that bind them, only to lose it in the dark shuffle of history? As we stand before the polished obsidian mirror of the past, the answer remains out of reach, lingering like a cold breath on the back of the neck. Perhaps the true secret lies not in any single artifact, but in the silent chorus they form together, waiting for a mind brave enough to hear the forgotten song. The final mystery, then, is not what these relics are, but why they were hidden and what we might awaken should we ever piece the shattered manuscript back together.